He was just an old man in a flannel jacket, waiting patiently at the DMV until someone noticed the patch on his cap, and a Coast Guard officer stood at attention in the middle of the waiting room. Earl Whitaker was 81 years old, worn jeans, faded red flannel, weathered hands that knew rope and salt better than most men knew their own names. On his head sat a baseball cap, navy blue, sun-bleached along the brim, with a small embroidered patch that read USCG Veteran. He leaned lightly on a wooden cane, the kind you buy at a pharmacy, not the kind you inherit. His beard was neatly trimmed. His posture, even bent slightly with age, carried a kind of quiet discipline. No one at the DMV gave him a second glance. The waiting room smelled like coffee and stress. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A woman near the window argued on her phone about insurance. A teenager slumped in his chair, earbuds in, face glued to his screen. An automated voice called out numbers in a monotone loop. Earl sat near the back, hands folded over the top of his cane. He watched people come and go, watched them rush, complain, sigh. He didn't mind waiting. He'd learned patience a long time ago, when waiting meant surviving. His number had been called 20 minutes ago, but the clerk was overwhelmed. The system was lagging. The line was long. People were getting impatient. "Sir, can you please step aside for now?" the clerk said, barely looking up. "We've got others who've been waiting." Earl didn't argue. He just nodded and moved back toward the plastic chairs near the window. Behind him, a younger man in a hoodie muttered under his breath, "Boomers, man! Always think the world owes them something." Earl heard it. He always heard it. But he didn't turn around. He just sat down, rested his cane against his knee, and waited. He'd been dismissed before. It didn't sting anymore. Not like it used to. 10 minutes later, the door opened, and a woman in full Coast Guard service uniform stepped inside. Lieutenant Junior Grade Rachel Myers. Crisp white shirt, dark blue trousers, ribbons across her chest. She was there for a routine license renewal after a recent transfer to Station Morro Bay. She scanned the room out of habit, assessing, aware, and her eyes landed on the old man by the window, more specifically on his cap. USCG Veteran. Something about the way he sat, the discipline in his posture, the weathered hands resting on that cane, made her look twice. She'd grown up around coasties. She knew the bearing when she saw it. She walked directly toward him, her boots clicking on the linoleum. Earl glanced up, confused. "Excuse me, sir," she said quietly. "I'm Coast Guard. May I ask when you served?" Earl blinked. His expression didn't change much, but something flickered behind his eyes. Memory. Wait. "Long time ago, ma'am," he said slowly. 65 to 85. Made it to lieutenant commander before I retired. Rachel's posture straightened slightly. "What was your last posting, if you don't mind me asking?" "Cutter Davenport," Earl said. "Executive officer. Northwest Pacific." Her breath caught. "In 1978? During Hurricane Alma?" Earl nodded once. Her father used to tell the story at the dinner table. How the sky turned black. How the waves grew taller than buildings. How the captain went down when the rigging snapped, blood pouring from a gash above his eye. How the XO, a man named Whitaker, lashed himself to the wheel and refused to let go. 30-foot swells, her father would say, staring into his coffee, and he just kept us pointed into them. 8 hours, wouldn't even take water, wouldn't let anyone else near that wheel. Rachel had asked once why he never got a medal. Her father had smiled sadly. He did. He just didn't accept it. She stood straighter. Then in the middle of that crowded DMV, in front of tired clerks and annoyed civilians and fluorescent lights, Lieutenant Junior Grade Rachel Myers came to attention. Boots together, shoulders back, eyes forward. "Sir," she said, voice steady but thick with emotion, "my father was aboard that cutter." "Seaman Myers, you saved his life." The room went still. The clerk stopped typing. The guy in the hoodie looked up from his phone. An elderly woman near the counter turned her head. Earl stayed seated. He didn't salute back, didn't stand, just looked at her with the kind of tired humility that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. "Your father did his job," Earl said quietly. "We all did." "No, sir," Rachel said, shaking her head. "He told me the story my whole life." The captain was knocked unconscious when the mast rigging snapped. Comms were down. You took the helm, lashed yourself to the wheel, rode out 30-foot swells in zero visibility for 8 hours straight. She paused, her voice cracking just slightly. 23 men made it home because of you. My father was one of them. He said you were recommended for the Coast Guard medal, said you refused it, said you were just doing your duty. Earl's jaw tightened. He looked down at his hands. Scarred knuckles, thick veins, fingers that still remembered the bite of a ship's wheel in a storm. For just a moment, he was back there. August 1978, northwest of the Channel Islands. The wind screamed like something alive. The rain came sideways, sharp as needles. The deck pitched 40 degrees, then 50. Men clung to railings to each other. Water poured over the bow in walls of black glass. Captain Reese was down. Blood soaked through the bandage on his head. The radio man shouted into a dead mic. The engine room reported flooding. Earl stepped up to the wheel. His hands closed around it. Cold steel, slick with spray. The ship lurched. He braced his legs, felt the deck roll beneath him. "Lash me in," he said. "Sir?" "Do it." They tied him to the console with a safety line. His world became the compass, the waves and the wheel. Turn into the swell. Ride it up. Let her nose drop. Don't let her broach. Don't let her turn sideways. If she turns, she rolls. If she rolls, they're done. His shoulders burned. His hands went numb. Salt stung his eyes. The wheel fought him like a living thing. Every muscle in his body screamed, but he held on, hour after hour after hour. And when the sun finally broke through the clouds, when the wind dropped to 30 knots and the sea turned from black to gray, 23 men were still breathing. "I just kept her nose into the waves," Earl said hoarsely. "Anyone would have done the same." "But you did it," Rachel said. "And I grew up knowing your name." Whitaker. The man who wouldn't let the sea take them. Someone from the line spoke up. "What storm?" Rachel turned, still standing at attention. August 1978. Hurricane Alma. The Coast Guard cutter Davenport was running a search and rescue northwest of the Channel Islands when the storm changed course. Winds hit 90 knots. Waves like mountains. She gestured toward Earl. The captain was incapacitated. This man took command. Manual steering, no autopilot, no radar. He kept that ship pointed into the wind for 8 hours. Saved everyone aboard. The guy in the hoodie had gone pale. The clerk stood frozen, her hands still hovering over the keyboard. Rachel looked back at Earl. "My father passed 2 years ago, sir. But before he did, he made me promise something." Earl looked up. "He told me, if you ever meet Earl Whitaker, you tell him thank you. You tell him we never forgot." Her voice broke. "So thank you, sir, on behalf of my father and every soul that made it home that night." Earl's throat worked. His eyes were damp, but he didn't wipe them. He just nodded. "Your father was a good sailor," he said hoarsely. "I'm glad he made it home." Rachel swallowed hard. "He used to say you were the bravest man he ever met. Not because you fought the storm, but because you refused the medal afterward." Earl looked away. "That medal wasn't for me. It was for the 23 men who trusted me to get them home. They earned it. I just held the wheel." "They gave you the ceremony anyway," Rachel said softly. "My father told me. Said you stood there in your dress blues, and when the admiral tried to present it, you declined. Said the only honor you needed was seeing your crew walk off that ship alive." Earl's voice was barely a whisper. "I meant it. The clerk came out from behind the counter. Her face was flushed. Sir, I, I'm so sorry. Please come up. Right now. Earl waved her off. It's all right, miss. I'm in no hurry, but Rachel wasn't having it. She gently took his arm and helped him to his feet. The entire waiting room had gone silent. Some people were crying. Others just stared, humbled and ashamed. The line parted without a word. Earl walked to the counter. Rachel stayed beside him the whole time, even though her own number hadn't been called. When the clerk processed his paperwork, her hands were shaking. Thank you for your service, sir, she whispered. Earl just nodded. Outside, after it was done, Rachel asked if she could take a photo. Earl hesitated, then agreed, but only if it wasn't posted online. She promised. They stood together on the sidewalk, her in uniform, him in flannel, both of them steady and strong in different ways. Before they parted, Rachel reached into her pocket and pulled out a small brass pin. It was tarnished, old, a miniature anchor with a tiny engraving on the back. My father carried this every day after the Davenport, she said. He wanted you to have it. I've been holding on to it since he passed, hoping I'd find you. Earl stared at it. His hands trembled as he took it. Thank you, he said. And for the first time that day, his voice broke. A few days later, a small piece ran in the local paper. Unsung hero of the sea, retired Coast Guard officer identified after decades of silence. Earl didn't read it. He didn't need to. The next morning, he was back on his porch. The house was small, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where the streets smelled like pine and the ocean was just a memory carried on the wind. Inside, the walls were bare except for a single black and white photo. 23 men standing on the deck of the Davenport, arms around each other, smiling like they'd just cheated death. Because they had. Earl sat in his chair, hands moving slowly through the motions of tying a bowline. Muscle memory older than most of the people who'd been in that DMV. His cane leaned against the railing. In his lap sat an old brass compass, scratched and tarnished, but still true. Next to it, now, was the pin Rachel had given him. The sea was gone, but it had never really left him. And somewhere in a frame on Rachel Meyer's desk was a photo of her father in his coasty dress blues, young, smiling, alive. Because one man refused to let go of the wheel. The truth is, there are thousands of Earls out there, men and women who held the line when everything was falling apart, who made the hard calls, who brought people home. Most of them never made the news, never got the parade, never wanted it. They're in the checkout line at the grocery store, sitting quietly at the DMV, walking their dog at dawn. And unless you know what to look for, a certain way they stand, a patch on a worn cap, the look in their eyes when the wind picks up, you'd never know what they carried. But they're there, and they're worth noticing. If this story made you stop and think about the quiet heroes around you, hit that subscribe button. Echo Bravo tells the stories that don't make headlines, but should, because the world needs to remember, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the voice at the end of the day that says, I'll take the wheel.